各族裔法轮功学员遍布全球。是什么力量在吸引着不同文化背景的练功人？请随大海访谈，了解他们对自然、社会与人生的看法。尤里你好。
你好。
很高兴你给我们这样一个机会能够分享您自己的生活经历。先来聊一聊您的成长过程吧。
我也高兴。Thank you for having me on your program. I really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity for me to share my story with a lot of your viewers. I was born in a small town of, it was a military base in, it's called Priazorsk, Kazakhstan. So it used to be back in the day, USSR was united, so Kazakhstan was part of USSR, so it was former Soviet Union. And I was born in a military family. My father was an Air Force engineer, and later he became a major, and my mother was working as a secretary for the base. Growing up in former Soviet Union, it was just really, it was very lonely. Like I felt abandoned as a child, because I would be either in daycare and then, picked up very late at night, or I'll be in school. And when I was in school, I had to walk to school by myself, come back from the school by myself, and I would have like a list of chores on the refrigerator, even though it was, even first grader or second grader. As a result, a lot of us get in trouble. And then we'll get punished pretty badly afterwards when the parents come back. And the expectation was you are a child of officers, so you're supposed to behave, well, and set yourself sort of as an example for other kids. But, kids are kids. Looking back at my childhood, I think it was pretty like a gray, black and white world for me, and it was pretty traumatizing because, first of all, my parents had to work all the time. So they were not home. They were gone basically from 7 o'clock in the morning until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. My father would go to military base for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and so I wouldn't even see him. Back then, Soviet Union was very known for ballet and gymnastics, so of course I joined ballet.
我问一下，普通人家的孩子有机会去跳芭蕾吗？
Yes, yeah. It was free, so you didn't have to, because everything it's created by Communist Party, so all these organizations were free, although there were few. I was deemed too fat for ballet, so even though I liked it, I didn't really fit in, and that's why my parents transferred me to gymnastics. On the bright side, we had this little bit of freedom, I guess, amount to, we had all of us had bicycles. And as I said, in the town we were, there were like 1 or 2 cars. So you don't see any cars, and you can ride bicycle anywhere. And parents were pretty confident to let us go and then play. So we would, we had a basketball rink in the middle. We had like 4 buildings. So we'll have a basketball ring in the middle, and then in the wintertime we will flood it with the water. So it would be like an ice skating rink. So we can go ice skating there, or we can ride our bicycles to the lake. And the town was located, Priazorsk is on Lake Balkhash, and it's right on the border with northern China. I mean, literally you can go over the lake, a little bit of land, and here's China. It was a lot of... the cuisine was very similar to northern Chinese, like the dried fish or, other things. Yeah. And there was a desert. So I remember what we did, because there's not much to do there. So it's big open space. In the summertime, they would have these big salt, like made out of salt, like mountains. And we'll slide on them because they're so tall, and then we'll just have a kind of like plastic thing, and we'll just slide on them, or go to desert and explore, find, my father and I, we would find scorpions or spiders, and then he would put them in the beeswax. And so there was like our little collection of, little things bugs and all that we found there. And sometimes what he also would do is actually, he would find 2 male scorpions and put them in a jar, kind of put a mesh on top and let them fight. That was our entertainment. Wow. I know in China, you use the crickets, right? Yeah. So we did with scorpions. We'll push one another and then they'll sting each other with the tail. that was kind of, yeah. When I went to school in the first grade, we were required to join the elementary level of Communist Party, which is Октябрята, is October youth organization. So they give you a little star, and then inside the little star, there's a portrait of Lenin. And so we have to swear allegiance that we will give our life to the party, for the Communist Party, and to its leader, Lenin, early on. So as you enter the school, that starts. In the 4th grade, we were expected to join Pioneer Organization, which is like the second level or second tier of the Communist Party. And so at that time, you take the little star off, and then they give you like a red scarlet scarf that you put on, and there's a whole ceremony you go through, and again swearing allegiance to the Communist Party. And basically what that means is you will, at any moment that party needs you, you would have to come forth and do whatever they're asking you to do, and even to the point of giving away your life. When I was growing up, I was a curious kid, and I was a little rebellious, and I didn't like all this control. It was really hard, and it was really difficult for me. I always managed to stick out, for good or bad, and often got in troubles. And there was a group of us in our class, so I don't remember what we did, but we got in trouble. And it was right before this big ceremony on the Central Square where you'll join the Pioneer Organization. And so teacher held us hostage for several hours in her office, and giving us, a lecture that we misbehaved, and now we are in question whether we can even join the Pioneer Organization, and how horrible it is. It's almost, I felt at that time, it was like almost the end of your life. After several hours, she let us out, and then she let us join the ceremony. We were a little late, and then I felt so like, oh my gosh, I'm part of this. I can be pioneer now. It's a big deal. I didn't know what the allegiance meant, because you're a child. You don't understand. Came the 7th grade, where you are allowed to go through a process to join the 3rd tier of a Communist Party. And I was not allowed to. Now I understand that the whole Communist Party ideology, it was against my human nature to be able to question things, to put friendship or relationships with your friends and your family and relatives above the party. So that was considered a crime. Now I know that I was lucky that I didn't join the organization. Yeah. So that was good. Yeah.
是苏联那个时候有很多和中国社会非常相似的地方。
Yes. I know that a lot of things that were in Russia or in Soviet Union were imparted to China. My understanding of what happened in China, I think it was even like Communist Party regime took another level of extreme. That part of my childhood. And then my father was transferred to Samara City. I think we were staying there for about a year. And so we were just living in one room. So everything was done by hand. We did the laundry in the bathtub. Kitchen was shared, and it was 3 floors. So all these families. So when I was 15 years old, I remember then my mother, my father, and I, we had a tea on the balcony, and it was a very nice, spring day. So we had good conversation. And my mother decided to share a story about what happened to her when she was in her 20s. She was working as a secretary in the military base. And, secretaries would usually for lunchtime, they will get together and they would go get maybe a haircut or maybe go together for lunch somewhere in the cafeteria or do some other things. And so that day they went for haircut, and there was several of them. And one of the general secretary shared that there is a new group of officers just graduated from academy, and they're about to arrive on the base, and how exciting it is, all these new men coming, and they kind of joked about it and giggled about it, and that was it. And so my mother came back from lunch back to her office, and right away she was summoned by KGB, and they put her in a different room, and they had the lights in her eyes. And there's 2 men, and they were starting interrogation, and they were asking her, where did she get the information about these new officers coming to base? And she says, well, the general secretary just shared that, and it's not classified information, so I assume that was okay. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, how about your husband shared that information with you? She's like, no, it just happened. I didn't even see my husband. And they said, well, I think it was your husband. What they're trying to do is to recruit her, basically, to spy on her husband. So she turned to me and she says, I told them I wouldn't do it. Later, many, many years later, I reflected on that and I thought about it, and I thought, wow, whoever said no to KGB? No one. Nobody ever said no to KGB. All of a sudden I realized, wow, the damage it's such a huge damage that the family is being destroyed from within, approaching 15, 16. So my sister was born a year later. There was a big epidemic of salmonella. A lot of kids ended up in a hospital and they were dying. This was the first time, actually, and then I've heard my mother say to my father, I don't care what you believe in or what you don't believe in. I want you to go to church, and I want you to pray to God, and I want you to ask him to save our daughter. He went to church and he prayed probably, and my sister recovered. She recovered shortly after that. So that was the first time I was introduced to a concept of God, praying, and church. I've never heard that before. Nobody talked about it.
我打断一下哈，那我听说就是苏联有东正教，是不是人们可以自由的信仰宗教呢？
No. Former Soviet Union was, it was heavily promoted atheism. Most of the churches were destroyed. A lot of churches turned into storage facilities. People were not allowed to believe in religion. What they were allowed to believe is party. So they told me a story that when I was born, my father's mother, my grandmother, and her husband, my grandfather, wanted to baptize me. Mm-hmm. So they wrote an official letter to the Communist Party requesting to, baptism. Mm-hmm. And the Communist Party responded back to them and said no. A couple of years later, I think I went to visit them during the summer. My father and I came to visit them, and I asked them about the story. I thought, oh, okay. But they had a church right next to their house. And I thought, why don't I just go there and find out, if I can get baptized? And it was pretty simple, actually. They asked me if I wanted to get baptized by myself. They walked me through, and then next thing I know, I was 19, and I got baptized. But the problem was, I didn't know what that meant because I went through a ritual. The very foundation of why one should become a Christian was absent. You have a relationship with God. right? That's how you cultivate your relationship with God. All these things were, nobody talked about it. It was more about, oh, okay, so now you're Christian, so you need to buy, a cross, and then you need to go to church on Sundays, and you buy candles, you burn candles, kowtow, and then ask, God to forgive your sins, and then you go on Monday and sin again. People who are in charge of the church, the administration and popes and all that, they're actually controlled by the party. And when I came to America and I started seeing other people who believe in like Catholics or other religions and how they approach, how they teach their young people what religion is, then I understood, oh, that's not what I thought.
我再问个问题哈，您刚才说好像俄罗斯的这种宗教和西方的宗教还不太一样。
That's right. That's right. I think it's being used as a tool to manipulate people, to manipulate people's thinking, and to manipulate their minds to achieve what needs to be achieved by whoever is in charge. I wanted to tell you a story when I had my mother's mother. She was a grandmother, so she had the time. She was retired. And she basically taught me everything I know. She taught me how to cook. She taught me how to sew. She taught me how to knit. She taught me gardening. She taught me a lot of things. And we had a very close relationship. And I loved going there because that was a place for me where I can just roam around on the fields. It was this very tiny town. There was not much, like the governance of the town was not strict. She told me an interesting story. My grandfather's mother was a very religious person. She came from aristocratic family. Of course, they were hiding that back at the time because, people were afraid to talk about their backgrounds or, affiliation with. In Russian, for Russian people, is that you, like in the corner, you would make a little, like a shelf, and then you put icons in there, and you put candles in there, and then you burn in, candles, and you pray. So she had that in her room. And because my grandmother was so brainwashed by the Communist Party, and also they were like the second generation after Bolshevik Revolution, they went through Stalin era, which people were terrified. They were so terrified by Stalin that nobody talked about, their true ancestry, if they were wealthy. I questioned my grandmother actually about, what family she came from, and she wouldn't talk about it. So people were so terrified of Stalin that they wouldn't even talk about it. It was a taboo to say anything, even after he was gone. She was so afraid that somebody's going to come to their house and find out that they have her husband's mother living with them, and she believes in God and not Communist Party. She eventually drove her icons and all that station from her room to the bathroom. And I asked her, how does she feel now about this? Mm-hmm. And what she told me, other things in her life happened that made her to believe in God. So she became Christian eventually. And then she understood that she's being punished by being blind for what she has done to her husband's mother, for not allowing her to practice Christianity or believe in God. And she felt really regretful. And so she prayed every day for forgiveness. Talk about educational system. I know a lot of people often say, oh, how wonderful it is to have a free educational system, that everybody has an equal opportunity to learn. When I was, there, I didn't realize the extent of the censorship that existed there, because we were not allowed to read specific books. Later on, when I became a teenager, I've learned that there's books that being passed down from, person to person with the kind of message like, if you get caught, that's your own business. I didn't give book to you, but here's books to read. Like, for example, Bulgakov, he was very famous writer, and he wrote a book. It's called Master and Margarita, and I remember everybody wanted to read it, but it was not available to the public because he kind of criticized the regime. So books like that, or Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, at first it wasn't available to the public to read. So things, books that contain any kind of form of criticism of the Communist Party or regime, or put in question the existence of people in Soviet Union, then they were not allowed to be read or being published. And I guess, I don't know, I still don't know who organized all these underground publishing houses, but the books were produced and people were reading them in secret. So books, and then also it applied to music too. Like I remember my father had this collection of Beatles, and it was in the bathroom, and so above the toilet he kind of built in this secret sort of chamber where it looks like just a storage on the outside, and he had an entire collection of Beatles vinyls back then, which was a big deal. And I thought, wow, it was pretty brave, because he's an officer, he was a major at that time. If somebody would find out that he did that, he would have been in trouble. Since the big changes came, to Russia, the perestroika happened, the entire infrastructure of Soviet Union collapsed. My generation wanted democracy and freedom of speech and thought and all these things. But after several years, I realized that it's just a different label on the door. The whole system didn't change, but the people are the same. I was about 16, 17, and my father just retired. My mother had my sister, so she was still on maternal leave for 3 years. And we lost all our money. All our savings were lost because the bank system collapsed. And my father had to work like 5 jobs to support a family. There's no such thing for a teenager to find a job in Russia. It was pretty difficult. And a lot of, like police became mafia, mafia became police. A lot of people were after quick money, and it was a lot of bad deals were made. I know some of my friends died, were killed because of the bad dealings. And then also what happened is the country opened up, and then drugs came in. Promiscuous sex was then advertised, nightclubs, alcohol and all this was promoted. Like, so for our generation, I basically stepped into the era where you in society that was closed, kind of infantile in a sense, because it was not exposed to the world. And then all of a sudden you take all these guards and all that stuff floods in. I consider that time very damaging. And part of my youth was just sort of eaten up by that kind of, poor behavior, because I made a lot of bad choices back then. And my life made my life very difficult as a result.
您是什么机缘接触到法轮功，开始练法轮功的呢？
So in 1998, I was planning to come to United States. And in order to come to United States, you have to go through medical examination at the embassy. And the doctor said to me, oh, you have a thyroid disease. He urged me, he said, it's very serious. This is overactive thyroid. You really need to go and have an operation. And I was so scared, frustrated. So I called my mother, and she says, well, go to America. It's the best place in the world. If there's really like serious issue, then, there are good doctors there, so they'll take care of you. And then when I came here, went to doctor, and it got confirmed. And so the solution is for me to have an operation. I was looking for alternative methods to heal my illness. I was tired of living life like in these little sprints or spurts, of energy. It was really difficult because if I had a job and I couldn't take a nap, that was really hard for me. Now, in addition to that, I smoked for 22 years. And because everybody smoked in Russia. So I started smoking earlier, and my parents smoked, their parents smoked. So it was kind of like this, everybody was smoking. So that was the state of society. And I remember even at work, my boss would want me to be at my desk. So he would say, you smoke in the office. I don't care. So for me, I was living on cigarettes, coffee, cream, and sugar. And my counter was filled with vitamins and, pills for any ache. So if I had a headache, I had these kind of pills. If I had something else, I had other pills. And I was taking tons of all that every day. And it didn't make a difference, really. Like, it would help a little bit, but then you're back to the same thing. So I tried different things. I've tried different meditations. I've tried yoga. I've tried other kind of spiritual and physical practices. But the problem with them, I always found, is that you start doing it and you feel good for a little bit, but then you sort of hit plateau, and then you're back to the same old. So it didn't have the fundamental transformation. When I graduated from college, my father came. I asked my father to come because I was very proud. I got an education in art. I double major in painting, drawing, and ceramics from Peck School of the Arts in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. During his visit, he found this little store, and he said to me, I think you would really like to work there part-time. That would be good for you. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And, after he left, few months later, I've decided to go to that store. So I came to this store and I met the owner and her husband. They were looking for help. So I said, well, I'm looking for a part-time job. And after an interview, they hired me as a store manager. While we were talking, she gave me a flyer of Falun Dafa, and she says, oh, have you ever heard about Falun Dafa? I said, no, never heard of it. She says, oh, it's a great practice. It's based in universal principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. And there's easy exercises. If you want to try it, you can come and join. We have a group study here, so you can learn the exercises and study with us. And that was it. So I went home and I was talking to a friend of mine, and I told her that the owner invited me to do this meditation. I said, no, I don't want to do it. I really don't want to do it.
优丽为什么转变了想法？下集继续。